This is Intelligence Matters, sponsored by FLAIR, a leader in providing actionable cyber threat intelligence to companies and governments around the world.
Bonnie Glaser is the managing director of the German Marshall Fund's Indo-Pacific program. She is widely regarded as the expert on Taiwan. She joins us today to talk about the coming Taiwan presidential election and Beijing's likely response. We'll be right back with that discussion after a quick break. I'm Michael Morell, and this is Intelligence Matters. The lines between geopolitical risk and cyber risk are blurring. FLAIR is a next-generation, continuous threat exposure management SaaS platform that equips corporate information security teams with world-class collection and continuous monitoring across dark web cybercrime forums, markets, Telegram channels, and sources of geopolitical risk. FLAIR sets up in 30 minutes, creates actionable intelligence from hour one, and is used by governments, security teams, and threat intelligence teams around the world. You can try FLAIR's free trial at their website, flair.io. That's flair.io. Bonnie, welcome. It's great to have you on the show again. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me back, Michael.
So let's jump right in. The presidential election in Taiwan is only days away. Now, our listeners should know that we're taping this on the 3rd of January, so any references that, Bonnie, you make to polling will be as of early January, as opposed to when we're going to drop this episode, which is on the 10th of January, just 3 days before the election. I just wanted our listeners to know that. And Bonnie, maybe the best place to start is with the candidates. Can you walk us through the three candidates, their backgrounds, their political philosophies, whatever you want to say about them?
Sure. Well, Lai Ching-te, who is currently the vice president of Taiwan, he is now the candidate for the ruling party, the Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP. And prior to being vice president, he was premier, and before that, he was mayor of Tainan. Years and years ago, he went to Harvard University. He has a medical degree. And after he practiced for a little while, and I think he was doing some kind of physical therapy related work, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, he went into politics very young. And he has, I think in his early years as a politician, he was quite vocally pro-independence. And I think over the years, he has moderated his views, and particularly since he entered government at the national level in Taipei, which was only during Tsai Ing-wen's really her second term. So this is relatively new for him to be really at the national level. He's just been a local politician for a long time. I should say that he does lead in the polls about by 5 percentage points, though Taiwan's polls are really all over the map. And then second is Hou Youyi. And Ho is a mayor of New Taipei, where he was first the deputy mayor and then the mayor. His background really is quite interesting and quite unique for Taiwan. He comes from a police background. So he was the head of the police, the commissioner, and came through the ranks as a policeman. He was involved in the investigation when there was a shooting, when the prior DPP President Chen Shui-bian ran for office, and there was a shooting that took place that was with him and his VP candidate. So this is also the first time that he has run for president. And he doesn't really come from a traditional KMT background. He is running it as the Nationalist Party, the
Right, right,
Kuomintang. And his background is different in part because he's Taiwanese. And the first elected KMT president for Taiwan was Lee Teng-hui, and he
right.
also is native Taiwanese. But since then, we have had President Ma Ying-jeou, whose family came directly from mainland China. And so, being native Taiwanese, he hasn't had very strong support from the very deep blues in his party, those that are very committed to unification with China. And so Ho Yo-i was very smart in choosing a running mate, Zhao Xiaokang, who is pan blue, and his family comes from the mainland. And in fact, Zhao was the one of the founders of the New Party, which is a very small party in Taiwan, but it has advocated unification with China. So Ho Yo-i has his support rate has been running at about 25 to sometimes 30%. Some of the polls show as high as 35%. So again, polls all over the map. And I should mention that as of today, January 3rd, there will be no more polling in Taiwan because there is a law that after 10 days prior to the election, there can't be any polls or discussion of polling, which is, I think, a really terrific law. I think one that the United States should adopt. So very briefly, the third candidate is Ko Wen-je. And this is not the first time that we have had three candidates running for president in Taiwan, but in the past, the three candidates haven't all been competitive. And so this year, that's what's really different. Ko Wen-je is getting about 20% in the polls. And he's from the Taiwan People's Party, which is a really relatively new party. And the party is really Ko Wen-je, and Ko Wen-je is the party. And the reason why I think there's so much support for him is that there has been, I think, a bit of frustration with the lack of good governance that some, particularly the youth, feel from the traditional parties, the DPP and the KMT. People are tired, want change, they want new faces, they want new policies, and that's what Ko Wen-je really has been running on, this platform of providing better governance, different policies, but he has not endorsed explicitly the position of the 1992 consensus, which Ho Yo-i and the KMT have, and that is essentially the result of a meeting that took place between KMT representatives and Chinese Communist Party representatives in 1992, in which they both sides agreed, yes, we're both part of the same country, but we call it something different. And of course, the KMT said we call it the Republic of China, and the Chinese Communist Party said we call it the People's Republic of China. So Ko Wen-je is he's weaved in to try to avoid really taking a position, but at the same time, he has supported other policies that do seem like he wants to have a better relationship with China. And an example of that is that he has supported the building of a bridge between Jinmen, which is one of those very small islands that's part of Taiwan or the Republic of China, but right off the coast of mainland China. And the bridge would connect Jinmen to Xiamen. So that's just one example of a policy that suggests that he wants to have better relations with China.
So let me ask two quick questions. One is, you talked about the polling. What was the trend in the polling over the campaign? And then the second question is, since there's three candidates, it's possible the winner may end up with less than 50%. Is that enough to win the presidency, or does there have to be a follow-on election if somebody doesn't get over 50%?
So those are great questions. The person who gets the most votes becomes president. They don't need to get more
Okay.
than 50%. So there's no runoff, and the system that they have is a combined presidential and parliamentary system. They have both a premier, but the premier they have both a president and a premier, but the premier is actually appointed by the president. And there's actually some discussion among the candidates today about whether that system should be changed. The trend in the polling, in some ways, has been very consistent, and in other ways, has varied. The consistent aspect of it is that Lai Ching-te, who goes by the name in English of William, so I'll refer to him as William Lai.
It's easy for me to say.
I know. William Lai has been in the lead really since the very beginning, but his lead has narrowed. It was initially as high as 10% or even greater, and so his lead has narrowed. But again, there are many polls, and some of the polls include only landlines, and other include only cell phones, and then a third category would be the polls that actually include both. And the older people, the older generation, tend to still use landlines, but of course, the youth don't. And so I personally think, even though some of the most well-known and most reliable of the polls are only relying on landlines, nonetheless, I think we have to be a little skeptical as to how reliable they are. There's this My Formosa poll, which everybody really thinks is the best one, and it has had right now Lai Ching-te at about 40%. And maybe about 38%. And again, some of the other polls show that he is less, or if they include the cell phones, because the youth are voting for Ko Wen-je, who's the TPP. And I should have said earlier that Ko Wen-je's background is as a surgeon. He was a very, very well-known emergency room surgeon. And he often tells people that his preparation for the presidency is the best, because being a surgeon somehow teaches you or gives you the experience to lead a country.
Maybe.
Yeah, well,
Who knows?
maybe he is right. So just in the polls, the differences have been that sometimes Ho Yo-ii has been in the second place, other times Ko Wen-je has been in second place. My guess is that they're actually at about the same, but maybe we will see Ho Yo-ii come in second and Ko Wen-je come in third. The other point that I should make is that this is not only a presidential election, it is the election for the legislature. And that will be crucial, because over the last 8 years, while the DPP has been in power, it has had a legislature in which the DPP has had a majority. And of course, that has made it easier to pass legislation, to get things done. And I think that that is highly unlikely to continue. So regardless of really who wins, I think there may be no party that gets a majority in the legislature.
So, Bonnie, what are the issues that have dominated the campaign? We tend to focus on cross-states relations, right? Because that's what we're interested in. But on a day-to-day basis, what are the issues that are important to the electorate?
Well, I think, as in any country in the world, the economy is on the minds of everyone in Taiwan, and particularly the youth, because there have been stagnant wages, lack of jobs for people who are graduating from university, and housing is very, very expensive. But I think that in most cases, the issues that relate to the economy are also connected to relations with China. And every national election in Taiwan has been dominated by the concerns about what relationship Taiwan should have with mainland China. And this year really is no different. So when people ask me the question, are people more concerned about relations with China or about the economy, I generally start by saying you can't really separate them because should the policies that address Taiwan's economic problem, should they be policies that are connected to China, the KMT would say that closer relations with China is a positive way of helping Taiwan's economy grow and taking advantage of opportunities of trade with China. The DPP believes that Taiwan is too dependent economically on China and has been trying assiduously to reduce Taiwan's reliance on China. That has seen some effect over the last 8 years. Tsai Ing-wen has reduced the exports from Taiwan going to China, and for other reasons, there have been a reduction in economic exchanges and activity, including tourism in both directions, of course, a result of COVID-19. But even after the COVID-19 pandemic has somewhat abated, those visits by tourists have not resumed in either direction.
Are there demographic differences about how people think about cross-states relations? And I'm particularly interested in those younger folks, right, who are focused on the economy and who think things need to work better. I wonder how they think about China. I wonder if it's different, if that's starting to change or not.
I think that the youth in Taiwan, and we could think of them as ages maybe 18 and up, or 20 and up, for maybe 20 to 30, and even 30 to 40. These are all people, of course, not only born in Taiwan, but their entire experience has been in Taiwan, and in many cases their parents were even born in Taiwan, so they have to go back 2 generations for people who were from the mainland, for those who had a mainland background. So you have families in which the older generation came from the mainland and think of themselves still as Chinese, but the younger generation would think of themselves as Taiwanese. And public opinion polls have showed us a clear trend in a decrease of people who consider themselves as only Chinese. There's still a significant number who consider themselves both Taiwanese and Chinese, but a real growth in the percentage of people who see themselves as only Taiwanese. And this includes virtually all of the youth and people who are middle-aged. And it's interesting. I think back of the time when I lived in Taiwan, which was 1979 to 1980. If I met a young person, and at that time I was in my 20s, I would ask them, "Where are you from?" And they would often say to me, "Oh, I'm from, Hunan or Shanghai or Beijing." And I would say, "Well, surely you weren't born there." And they would respond by saying, "Oh, well, of course I wasn't, but my father was from that province." And they would never say that they were Taiwan, that they were from Taiwan. And that changed, I think, probably in the early to mid 1990s. And of course, nowadays, if you ask people, "Where are you from?" If they were born in Taiwan, they will definitely say, "I am from Taiwan, I am Taiwanese."
Are there any business issues, tax regulatory issues that are part of the political debate that could affect U.S. businesses in Taiwan, or not?
Well, the biggest issue, I think, has been that the United States and Taiwan do not have a bilateral agreement that would prevent companies from being taxed twice. And Taiwan does have these double taxation agreements with other countries. And in fact, Taiwan's representative, who is now she was the representative for the last 8 years, but this is Bi Kim Xiao, but she is now on the ticket with William Lai, so she's the VP candidate. But she pushed very, very hard and engaged with Congress on the issue of a double taxation agreement, and there's a lot of optimism now that that will go through at some point in 2024. So it has been a bit of an obstacle, maybe for some companies. U.S. investment in Taiwan is high. I don't have the figures in front of me, but the United States is not the largest investor in Taiwan. In fact, it's the European Union that's the largest investor. But this has certainly been an issue with Taiwan Semiconductor Corporation setting up its new fab in Arizona. And it's very costly to establish this new facility in Arizona. And part of it is because of the taxation. But of course, there's many other issues that are involved that, in fact, it probably won't get off the ground until next year, 2025. But there have been a lot of issues that just involve lack of talent, bringing in the right people, and the usual things that I think are involved in setting up what was the first overseas fab for TSMC.
So, Bonnie, I'm wondering to what extent Beijing's saber rattling has impacted this campaign. We've got balloons flying over Taiwan. We've got military exercises. We've got a recent statement by Xi on unification. Does it have the effect that Beijing wants it to have, or does it have the opposite effect?
Well, first, I would say that we have seen a great deal of attempted interference by the PRC in Taiwan's elections. And it was really remarkable that when President Biden met with Xi Jinping in San Francisco last month, that he told Xi Jinping that China should not interfere in Taiwan's elections. I'm pretty certain that no U.S. president has said that face to face to a president of China in the past. And I think this reflects the high level of concern that the United States has. And the Chinese are interfering in part because, yes, they want to shape the outcome, and because they have more capabilities, perhaps, than ever before to interfere. Some of the things they are doing are overt and others are covert. So, for example, an overt activity that Beijing has been doing has been to invite Taiwan's religious groups and local politicians to visit China in recent months and encouraging them to go back to Taiwan and use their networks to increase support for the KMT and for Hoyoi. They have been certainly courting Taiwanese businessmen, and I would not be surprised if that has involved some financial opportunities, maybe preferences given to individual Taiwanese businessmen, and also probably some financial support that is funneled to people in Taiwan through the temples in Taiwan. These are seen as ways in which the PRC can get money to support some of these candidates. There's also been an emphasis by Beijing on integrated development. And this is a policy of course, promoting economic integration between the two sides of the strait, providing preferences to people from Taiwan to invest and study and live in the province of Fujian opposite Taiwan. So there were some new policies that were announced just a couple of months ago. And then in the sort of covert area, I guess I would include things like, and of course financial support would be covert, but public opinion poll manipulation, I think, is taking place that are trying to suggest that the KMT candidate may have a chance of winning the election and therefore encouraging people to vote for him. There's also been rumors that have been spread on social media about William Lai, about the alleged dangers of the DPP, amplifying this mantra that's coming from the KMT that they will bring peace. The KMT will bring peace, but the DPP, if kept in power, will result in war. They've also been using social media to sow doubts about the reliability of the United States. That's, of course, one of the main pillars of the DPP's security strategy. There's been some economic coercion where China has banned the import of some products from Taiwan, but those have been very, very small, have a really limited impact on Taiwan's GDP. And then there's been things like disinformation campaigns on even YouTube and TikTok that are really designed to create divisions within Taiwan's society and amplify pro-Beijing narratives. As to the efficacy, I would say that this kind of messaging, narratives, disinformation from China probably don't have much of an impact on those who have already decided who they're voting for, those from what we would call the deep green or the deep blue sides of the spectrum. But maybe swing voters would pay attention to them. Maybe it would have an impact on them. And in other words, if a race is really close, either at a local level for the legislature or if, in fact, it's very close at the national level, then there might be some impact. But generally speaking, I think that this is something that Taiwan's government is paying a lot of attention to. It tries to combat China's disinformation, and I think they are confident that China's election interference at the end of the day won't be decisive.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of a discussion with Bonnie Glaser.
Beacon Global Strategies is the premier national security advisory firm. Beacon works side by side with leading companies to help them understand national security policy, geopolitical risk, global technology policy, and federal procurement trends. Beacon's insight gives business leaders the decision advantage. Founded in 2013, Beacon develops and supports the execution of bespoke strategies to mitigate business risk, drive growth, and navigate a complex geopolitical environment. With a bipartisan team and decades of experience, Beacon provides a global perspective to help clients tackle their toughest challenges.
If William Lai wins the election, what does the day after the election look like in both Taipei and Beijing with regard to cross-states relations?
Well, that's really a crucial question. If Lai Ching-te wins, he would be inaugurated. The inauguration would be on May 20th for the president. So Tsai Ing-wen will remain president until then. And we've already seen daily military pressure on Taiwan growing, and that will continue. It really started to increase after the visit by then Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi in August of 2022.
Right.
And we have seen lots of aircraft operating around Taiwan virtually every day. In fact, just on, I believe on January 1st, for the first time, Beijing flew a balloon over Taiwan from west to east. Now, it may be this is the first time that it was reported. It may have happened earlier, but their Ministry of National Defense is now reporting balloons operating around Taiwan. That really just began in early December. And so this was the first time that they reported a balloon flying over Taiwan. So I think we'll see that continue. And the day after, yes, we could see more actions taken by the PRC. Their Navy ships since August of 2022 have been going very close to Taiwan, up to the 24 nautical mile contiguous zone. So the territorial area, sea space and airspace, is 12 nautical miles, and then 12 miles extending outward from that is the contiguous zone. And so these Navy ships are going quite close. We could see fighter aircraft going inside that 24 nautical mile zone, or even Navy ships. At worst, we could see fighters flying inside the 12 nautical mile airspace or even over Taiwan. And I think that would be very provocative and dangerous, especially since Taiwan's rules of engagement in their military are to fire upon any threat that exists inside their airspace. That's relatively new. For decades, they were told they had to absorb the first shot. But that has changed. And so one could see how that could lead to in an incident and potentially even a shooting down of an aircraft. I think we might see more economic pressure. There was an agreement on economic issues, which was the Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement, that dates to 2010, and it affected over 500 Taiwanese products that had their tariffs that had existed previously reduced to zero. So recently, China has selected a few dozen and already begun to raise tariffs on some of those products. And these are mostly chemicals and some agricultural products. And of course, they will have an impact on specific companies in Taiwan, but their impact on the overall economy is really not that great. They include some things that China is very dependent on Taiwan for. And of course, there I'm referring to semiconductors and other electronics. And I don't think that China wants to shoot itself in the foot. So I doubt that they will completely suspend the ECFA. But I do think we'll see more economic pressure going forward.
Bonnie, maybe take the last few minutes here and talk about the longer term. Beijing is serious about unification, correct?
Absolutely. As Xi Jinping says, it's a historical inevitability, and it must take place.
And given that, my guess, and I'm going to ask you in a minute, to comment on what I say here, but my guess is that Xi would strongly prefer a non-military solution to a military one. And my guess is that his hope, perhaps even his strategy, is to build such a mighty military force across the strait that Taipei has no ability, no willingness to do anything but to come to some sort of an arrangement with Beijing. And two questions. One is that how you see his approach, or would you say it differently? And is there any reason to believe that if that's what he does think, he might be right?
So, Michael, I absolutely agree with you. I think that Xi Jinping wants to achieve reunification, but not at any cost. And I think he knows that the costs of trying to achieve it militarily are very high. If the PLA were to fail, that could in fact lead to a loss of legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party, and certainly a weakening of Xi Jinping's position at a minimum. I don't think Xi Jinping has confidence in his military, and of course there's a lot of evidence for that. We've seen in recent months some high-level PLA officers who have been removed, and including at the head of the rocket force. Not all of these were announced until last week. More names became known, even though there were rumors that this was going to take place. And so I think that Xi Jinping wants to, first and foremost, prevent Taiwan from becoming formally or legally independent. And he's not only worried about the DPP remaining in power and pushing for independence, he's also worried about potential support from the United States. And there's been a lot of talk in China about foreign interference in Taiwan. So if that were to happen, if you had a president in Taiwan pursue a real separation with the support of the United States, I have no doubt that Xi Jinping would launch an attack and attempt to take over the island militarily, because I think he would have no choice. He would have to do so for domestic reasons. But I think that's just a very remote possibility. So Instead, I think Xi Jinping is pursuing this strategy of trying to wear down the confidence of the Taiwan people in their government, in the fact that they can continue to exist separately, try to appeal to them, that becoming part of China, even if it's not a part of the People's Republic of China, but some kind of integrated arrangement, that is in their interests. And so I think that there's many ways that that China is trying to do this, and Xi Jinping keeps saying in his speeches that reunification is inevitable. He's even said that it is a requirement for achieving national rejuvenation, the target date for which is 2049. Now, Xi Jinping will probably, at least according to actuarial tables, I think he'll be 96 in 2049. He probably will not be in power. But there is a debate among experts about whether achieving unification is a legacy issue for him, that while he's in power, that he must achieve this. And my own view is that he wants to achieve progress. He wants to make independence impossible. He wants to put this cross-strait relationship on a trajectory of moving toward some kind of integration that can be called reunification. But I'm personally not convinced, at least not yet, that he has decided that he must achieve reunification before he leaves office. He continues to say that his policy is peaceful reunification and peaceful development across the Taiwan Strait, even as he refuses to renounce use of force.
So if that's his strategy, what's our best strategy for avoiding his success with his?
Well, I recently published an article in Foreign Affairs you may have seen.
Yes,
It's
it was excellent.
co-authored
Yes.
with Tom Christensen and Jessica Chun Weiss, in which we argue that deterrence is absolutely essential. We have to deter China from using force against Taiwan. But the deterrence is composed of two ingredients. Both of those components must be part of deterrence. So, of course, the United States has to have credible threats. And this, of course, involves the need to have the capability to defeat a PLA invasion and to help Taiwan defeat a PLA invasion, potentially, and hopefully have deterrence by denial, so that Xi Jinping will know that there is absolutely no way that force can be used, and therefore he will not try to do so. If we can't achieve punishment by denial, or if we can't achieve deterrence by denial in the near term, then we will have to settle for deterrence by punishment. And that is something that we have to do by dispersing, as we are, our positions that are bases or access to bases, and we now have more access in the Philippines, for example, than we've had before, and that's crucial. And of course, we have our bases in Japan, but we have to ensure that we have the capability to intervene. And then, of course, we have to help Taiwan not only through the provision of weapons, but increasingly through training, so that they really have the capability and demonstrate their resolve to defend their own country. And I think that is indispensable. So credible threats are absolutely important. And then the other side of that is credible assurances.
Right.
And Xi Jinping needs to know that if he does not use force against Taiwan, that Taiwan will not declare independence, and the United States will not support independence. And that also means that the United States has to assure Xi Jinping we won't return to something akin to our Mutual Defense Treaty, which existed between 1954 and 1979. And I actually think that ensuring our one China policy is credible while evolving, because it should not be static, that is a really indispensable part of deterrence. We have been successful in deterring Chinese military action against Taiwan for many, many decades. I remain confident that we can continue to do so, but I do think it's important that we have both credible threats and credible assurances.
Bonnie, thank you so much for joining us. Very insightful discussion of the election in Taiwan and what it might mean for relations between China and Taiwan and China and the United States, for that matter. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Michael. It's a great and really important conversation to have. There's a wide variety of views on how the United States should manage this growing threat that China poses to Taiwan and strengthen our relations with Taiwan. So thank you for inviting me to do the podcast, because I think that this issue really deserves a lot more attention.
Thank you, Bonnie. Before we sign off on today's episode, I want to say to our listeners that Andy and I want to hear from you more. We want to engage with you more. We want to know what you are thinking. With that in mind, I have 2 requests for you all. First, please rate and review the podcast, as well as the individual episodes, wherever you get your podcasts. And then each week, Andy and I will read 1 or 2 of the most interesting comments posted to Intelligence Matters, the relaunch site on Apple Podcasts. Be one of the first to have your comments read. Second, Andy and I would like to engage with you more directly, to talk to you directly, to have you ask us questions, for us to hear your thoughts on the world, to hear topics that you want us to cover, to hear what guests you want us to have on the show. So over the next few weeks, please send us your thoughts on what you think is the best way for us to talk with you directly. Send those ideas to intelligencematterspod@gmail.com. That's intelligencematterspod@gmail.com. We are looking forward to hearing your ideas. With that, today's guest was Bonnie Glaser. I'm Michael Morell. Please join us next week for another episode of Intelligence Matters.
Intelligence Matters is produced by Steve Dorsey with assistance from Ashley Berry and Sophia Rubin. Intelligence Matters is a production of Beacon Global Strategies.